How do we normally start these?
Just like that.
I'll miss it. One more week. Here we go. I have wonderful news for you. How old are you?
18.
I don't have wonderful news for you. I have wonderful news for you. If you are under the age of 18, you are in one of the happiest stages of your life. Don't click out of the video just yet. I know the bad days and depression and anxiety still are rampant, but statistically, as you grow in age, you wane in happiness. Dartmouth professor David Blanchflower conducted research of hundreds of thousands of people in 132 different countries, taking data from all sorts of people, be it rich, poor, middle class, educated, uneducated, employed, and unemployed. What he found was that people from all over the world experience what he calls a happiness curve. If you chart it on a graph, it kind of looks like the inverted version of the letter U. And as you go up in age, you also grow in despair. And if you're watching this and you are 18, or you're about to turn 18, I'm sorry. Once you hit 18, your happiness levels begin to decrease year after year, reaching peak unhappiness around the age of 47. Cue the midlife crisis, right? It's not all doom and gloom though, because if you just wait a few decades, you'll eventually reach your mid-60s, and it's then that your happiness levels actually start to match that of your 18-year-old self, slowly going up until the day that you die. But why? Blanchflower has a few theories here. He says one is a theory of expectations. When you turn 18, you're just graduating high school, you have plans to go to college, to start a career, to find a spouse, to have a little family of your own. The sky's the limit and you're optimistic. Life hasn't just slapped you over and over again with disappointment after disappointment. But as you grow older, you reflect back on your life and you discover that things normally just don't turn out the way that you planned. College wasn't all that you thought it would be. You didn't keep in touch with all of the friends that you were so close to in high school like you thought you would. You looked for a spouse, but you had a long string of bad dates, eventually leaving you desperate enough to try out Tinder, which is just basically Uber Eats just for sex, which doesn't have any connection or intimacy attached to it whatsoever. You struggle to find a job or end up getting a job in your field, but you end up hating it. But you can't do anything about it because you spent the last 4 years getting a degree so you could be sitting at the desk you're sitting in right now. To do anything else would make the last chunk of your life a waste of time, not to mention cost a whole lot more money. Life didn't turn out as you expected, and it left a bitter taste in your mouth. The second theory he has is all about comparisons. According to one article I read, Blanchflower speculates that people in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s are more likely to compare themselves to others and find themselves wanting. Meaning when you look at your life side by side with the life of another, you envy what that person has. Because while life might not have turned out well for you, it seems like it did for the people around you. That friend that you lost contact with post-graduation ended up graduating college early and with honors. She somehow got a triple major and is a lawyer who also owns her own bakery and runs a nonprofit that helps give water to kids in Africa. She snagged a super hot male model of a husband who also has a job that makes 6 figures, but don't you think that he doesn't have time to raise those 4 beautiful, blue-eyed, blonde-haired babies that they made? And you're seeing this day after day after day on Instagram, constantly looking at the highlights of someone else's life while you're sitting on your bed at 1 a.m, shoving spoonfuls of cereal in your mouth. And as you do that, over the years, you become deeply dissatisfied with the life that you have, plunging yourself deeper and deeper into despair, because everyone else seems to be traveling the world and accomplishing their goals, chasing their dreams, and honestly, that's just not been your experience. Which is why you see things like the midlife crisis, where people reach that peak level of despair around the age of 47, and in an attempt to return to some semblance of happiness that they experienced when they were younger, they go out and buy a brand new Corvette. Because if life didn't turn out to meet or exceed my expectations, but it seems like it did for everyone else, then maybe I can reconcile this problem by buying the happiness that I'm looking for. But as we've noted over the course of this series, when we try to fill the holes in our heart with things, it ends up leaving us temporarily satisfied, but ultimately hollow. Actor Jim Carrey sums it up like this: You spend the first half of your life acquiring and adding, thinking you can add to yourself, and it looks great. It looks great when you get a cool car and nice clothes, and you've done something that people admire, but it can never fulfill you. It's not where happiness comes from. And I know what you may be thinking. What if I'm the outlier here? What if I'm the one who gets lucky and everything actually does work out? I get the job, the cars, the career, the spouse, the 2-car garage, and a big house with a pool in the back. Surely I can fight the happiness curve then, right? Like surely if I get all the things that I want, I'll be satisfied, right? I want you to hear me just loud and clear. As long as you are looking to things to satisfy what only God can, you will be miserable at best. Troy Aikman, famous quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys, words it well. I'm going to read you 2 quotes, and I want you to notice that he ends up looking for the next thing that will satisfy him despite what stage of life he is currently in. I'll never forget when I was 12 years old. I couldn't wait until the day I was 16 and could drive a car. I thought that would be the end of life's problems. I mean, you can drive. What is there left? And then I turned 16 and realized there's still problems. And he goes on and says this. Well, I kind of said the same thing after my first Super Bowl. You think once you win it, all your problems are solved professionally, but I've won 2 now, and it hasn't solved a thing. Not a thing. Those quotes are taken from a New York Times article whose headline reads, Super Bowl, Troy Aikman asks, is that all there is? He went on to win 1 more Super Bowl, and after his Hall of Fame career as a quarterback, he decided to transition into a career as a broadcaster where he would basically narrate live football games for a television audience. And after narrating an exciting Super Bowl game, which would have been the pinnacle of his career because you can't get much higher than that in the NFL, Aikman said this, I may have just called the biggest game that I will ever call in this profession. I mean, I may look back on my career in broadcasting, and this may be the biggest game I'll ever call. And here we are, just an hour after the game ended, and everyone's ecstatic. What a great game and great ending. And I said, I could not be more miserable. Is that all there is? Is life just about acquiring more things, more cars, money, and status, about being in the career field of your choice and checking off one accomplishment after another? Because if it is, it seems like it's producing a whole lot of people who are seriously unhappy and deeply dissatisfied. Jim Carrey again puts it a little more bluntly. He says, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. What is the answer though? Like, how can we move through life not on a trajectory towards despair, but toward what Jesus called life and life to the full? Where no matter the circumstances, whether you're rich or poor, healthy or sick, famous or not, single or married, how can we experience gratitude, fullness, and life of a joy in the kingdom of heaven? And the answer this week is twofold. It's simplicity and contentment. If you missed the last few weeks of this series, or you're not a follower of Jesus and you've somehow stumbled upon this video and curious as to what all of this is about, we are in the penultimate week of our series on simplicity. There is just 1 week left, and we hope to go out with a bang next week. But if you need to catch up, all of the messages are here on the channel that you're watching this on. I recommend that you watch them in order and just smash that subscribe button while you're here. I hated that. To offer a refresher, we've been defining simplicity as this: limiting the number of our possessions, expenses, activities, and social obligations to a level where we are free to live joyfully in the kingdom with Jesus. Simplicity is an inward reality that results in an outward lifestyle, and it goes hand in hand with another inward reality, contentment. A reality that the Apostle Paul was really well acquainted with. In his letter to the church in Philippi, after they had just sent Paul a financial gift, he says this in Philippians 4, starting in verse 10. I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at last you renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I am not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through him who gives me strength. Probably heard that last verse quite a lot. We like to quote it a bunch and put it in our Instagram bios or sew it into our Letterman jackets. But notice the context that Paul used it in. He isn't saying like, I can get good grades because Jesus gives me the strength to do so, or because of Jesus' strength, I can achieve all of my hopes and dreams. He said that the strength that Jesus gives him is the secret to being content in any and every situation. Which is kind of surprising considering what's going on in Paul's life, because he's not writing this letter from a place of privilege or comfort. Instead, Paul is writing this while in prison, again, for the sake of the kingdom. Yet this has often been called the epistle or letter of joy. In its 4 short chapters, some form of the word joy occurs 16 times. And you could start to ask yourself while reading this, how can he say joy that many times? Or how can he come from a place of joy? How can Paul, who has fled the city of Philippi just years earlier because of persecution and illegal imprisonment, be so joyful while in chains? Or how can he experience joy when his belly is growling with hunger, or when he has no possessions except for the clothes on his back, or when he's being chased out of cities and hunted down and socially rejected because of his faith? How can he say that he has joy? In a word, contentment. In Greek, it's the word autarkes, and it means sufficient for oneself, strong enough or processing enough to need no aid or support, and independent of external circumstances, meaning no matter what is going on in life, Paul lacks nothing. To bring it back into English, one dictionary defines content as a state of peaceful happiness. Don't you want that? Don't we all want that? Don't you want to be able to be at peace in your body, mind, and soul, to be happy regardless of what you own or what you achieve or what others think about you? I think the majority of people would admit that that kind of a life sounds enticing. It sounds like something that we consistently hold before us as something that we someday hope to have but can never just seem to reach. Why don't we have it though? Why does the happiness curve still exist? I think it's because while most people want that kind of a life, they don't spend any time cultivating it. Remember the tail end of verse 11 there. I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. If the Greek is any indication there, Paul has learned to be content because he has spent time cultivating contentment through consistent practice. Meaning, contentment isn't just a nice idea that we would like to have someday. It is a discipline. It is something that, like all good things that are contrary to our nature, takes a conscious effort day in, day out, no matter what that day holds. Like a student who studies diligently for a test or an athlete who trains for a race, the follower of Jesus has to discipline themselves to be content. The student who doesn't study is likely going to do pretty poorly on whatever test or quiz they have. An athlete who doesn't train isn't going to win the gold medal. And likewise, the follower of Jesus who isn't content will never find satisfaction with life within the kingdom of God. You will always find yourself wanting to acquire more under the reign of a king who is known for giving absolutely everything away. Contentment is something that we simply just have to learn, which is not easy because disciplining yourself is rarely easy. But remember that line, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. Contentment is something we have to do and, by the grace of God, are able to do. And it's the way that we can experience true joy despite whatever life throws at us. Just look at the other side of the coin for just a second. Even in the lives of people who we think that they've made it, they still openly admit that they're not happy. Despite being famous or filthy rich, covered in expensive clothes while driving a nice car, operating in their dream job, one nagging question remains, is there more? And contentment silences that question. Instead of asking what else is there to gain, it says, I have all that I need. It's the remedy to greed and to satisfaction that we've been searching for, and it naturally leads you to simplicity. You cannot have one without the other, because contentment extinguishes the flame in our hearts that burns for more, and simplicity allows us to consciously remove more so we can learn to live with less. It is a cycle that, when centered around Jesus, consistently feeds itself. When you're focused on Jesus, what author Thomas Kelly called the divine center, that inner sanctuary of your heart where the divine resides, he will give you the strength to discipline yourself to be content, which naturally helps you practice simplicity, which is all about freeing yourself from the desires of more, leading you deeper into contentment as you get thankful for what little you have. Which naturally, I messed up there. It's why minimalist and former pastor Josh Becker says the lifeblood of simplicity is contentment. And when both are embraced, they allow us to do three things here. It allows us to focus on what actually matters in our lives instead of getting caught up in like petty stuff that ultimately has no worth or value. It allows us to be set free from the tyranny of more, and it allows us to exist in the world as is, with no added extras to try to garner the favor of other people or somehow manipulate your own levels of happiness. Both are practices that help us in our goal of becoming like the person of Jesus, a person of love who so radically loved the world that he gave his life for it. So if contentment is a discipline that you have to learn, how can you start to put it into practice to get on that road to becoming a person who is able to live free and joyfully in the kingdom of Jesus? How do you cultivate contentment? We have 6 experiments to that end that are taken from Pastor Bethany Allen's message on this topic. You can try to add all 6 of these into your life or just take one at a time. As with any of our experiments, there is no timeline here. You can try some for an hour, a day, a week, or not at all. I am not here to coerce or manipulate you. I'm here to teach you to follow Jesus. And in that journey of apprenticing under him, you'll find that he was actually right about what it means to be human. And these practices, along with the grace of God, have the potential to radically reshape your inner woman or man. So use them at your own risk. But to go straight ahead into it, first experiment you can do is practice gratitude. Gratitude simply means to be thankful or grateful. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do this. If you eat dinners at a table with your family, maybe you can go around the table and each say one thing that you're thankful for as you're sharing a meal together. If you have a long car ride home, you can think of a person who you're thankful for and actually just call them and tell them that you're thankful for them. You can end your Sabbath by talking to God and letting him know all that you're thankful for through prayer, or you can do it by writing it down in a gratitude journal. I keep a gratitude journal and it takes maybe 60 seconds to fill out every single morning. I just write down 3 things that I'm thankful for and then one reason for each. And studies have found that giving thanks actually helps people sleep better, lower stress, and improves interpersonal relationships. One study even found that keeping a gratitude journal specifically decreased materialism and boosted generosity among teenagers, which is exactly what we're all about here. Whatever the means, find a way to practice gratitude. Second experiment, take captive your thoughts. In biblical theology, the mind is the place of transformation, and as we learned in our message last week, the primary way that the devil wages war against your soul is by targeting your thoughts. So be very, very careful what you allow yourself to think about, especially in context of this message in regards to more. Catch yourself anytime you think, if I can just get that, then I'll be happy. Or if I can make this on a test, or if I could get that person to think this about me, then I'll be happy. All of those thoughts are rooted in discontentment, not being satisfied with where you're at in life. And if left unchecked, they can just be dangerous. As the poet Gerard Hopkins warns, the mind has cliffs, meaning you could fall and seriously hurt yourself through what you allow yourself to think. Dallas Willard takes it a step further, saying to be careful what you allow your mind to dwell upon, to be careful with what you even allow yourself to feel, because Satan didn't tempt Eve with material possessions or with money or fame, but with an idea, specifically the idea that God was holding out on something that she desperately needed to have. So to guard your mind in biblical language is to take captive your thoughts, to catch yourself thinking of them, and then instead of making them obedient to the desires of your flesh, making them serve Jesus instead. In the words of our friend Evagrius Ponticus from last week, be the doorkeeper of your heart, and do not let any thought come in without questioning it. Question each thought individually. Are you on our side or the side of our foes? And if it is one of ours, it will fill you with tranquility. It takes a conscious effort and a lot of work, but after a while, this experiment turns from discipline into something you just naturally start doing. Third experiment you can do, stop buying things. That's it. If this series has taught you anything, it's that more stuff will not make you happy. So actually put that to the test. Buy things that you actually need, not what you want, and have wisdom to distinguish between the two. Fourth experiment, let go of comparison. The easiest solution here would to be get off social media, but I am getting ahead of myself because we will talk about digital simplicity next week. But on that note, Bethany Allen has this great line in regards to Instagram. She says this: we always compare the worst of what we know about ourselves to the best assumptions we can make about other people. So stop playing the comparison game, because in the end, you will always end up being the loser. 5, invest in the lives of others. When you start sharing your time, money, and energy with others, you cultivate contentment because you open yourself up to new perspectives. It's why when people go on missions trips to developing countries, they come back with a whole new view on life. It's because when you may think you're poor in America, by comparison, you've actually brushed up against actual poverty in the world at large, and it ends up being eye-opening. Being with people who are less fortunate really allows you to take stock of what you have, naturally leading you to be more thankful. And the last experiment, this one comes from Josh Becker. He says, be content with what you have and never with what you are. Meaning contentment is not an excuse for complacency. It's fine to be content with your stuff and your car and your clothes. I'd encourage that. And it's even better to be content with how God made you, your personality, your quirks, what makes you tick, your physique, all of that. But there is always room for you as a person, and especially as a follower of Jesus, to grow. So don't settle where you're at. Don't settle for where you're at in your relationship with Jesus. Keep striving towards that goal of having Christ formed deep in you. And it's on that path that simplicity and contentment stop being disciplines that you have to force yourself to do, and it's a grind day after day, and instead slowly become part of who you are. May you live life to the full as you learn to be content with all that King Jesus has given you. I love you. Grace and peace to you, and I will see you next week for the finale of this series.